Well, hello again, everybody. This is Rory again with yet another Windows Mobile Development screencast for Channel 9. This time, I'm doing the first of a two-part screencast on syncing data with SQL Server. This is going to be the first part, obviously, hence the Part 1 section of the title, and it's going to be all about setup. And you might think it's a little strange to have a screencast on its own just being about setup, but the fact is, while syncing with SQL Server isn't terribly difficult, that is to say the code to do it isn't difficult at all, getting everything set up is actually a little bit of a pain, and that's where I think most people are going to have the majority of their problems. So I'm going to separate the talk down into these two sections, tackling these issues one at a time. So first we look at how to configure all the different components involved, and then in the next part of this talk we're going to look at how to actually sync the data using a technology called RDA, which stands for Remote Data Access. And unlike the other talks that I've been doing in this series, this one's actually level 300. And it's level 300 because I'm expecting that you're going to need a little bit more familiarity with different technologies than you would have needed with some of the previous talks. For example, you're going to need to know how to administer IIS. You're going to need to know how to deal with SQL Server. So it's a little more. It's a little deeper, a little more complicated, but you know, that's just what happens when things get more interesting. So what you need in order to complete everything that you're going to be seeing in this demo, if you want to do it at home, is first off you're going to need IIS, right? And while I can imagine that some people probably think this is sort of a strange requirement because you know, the first thing you're going to ask yourself is, what does IIS really have to do with syncing between a mobile device and SQL Server? Why can't the two just talk to each other? The fact is that not only is it simply just how we have to do it, but it's actually a pretty good way of doing things. IIS hosts a DLL that sort of acts as a broker, or I suppose some kind of a management piece between the mobile device and SQL Server. And one of the nice things about this is that we get some security from IIS, so if you need to install SSL or something like that, you can do that here fairly easily. It's not covered in this talk, but if you know, you're into that sort of thing and you know how to do it, you can definitely enable SSL for the communications level. We're also going to have the advantage of being able to hit a standard port, so when we're syncing from a remote location, we're not going to have a bunch of problems with firewalls. We're just going to be hitting port 80, getting right into IIS and syncing our data. So although it adds an extra step of configuration, the result is actually overall a better architecture, in my opinion, than if we didn't have IIS involved. Next, you're going to need SQL Server, and the last data screencast that I did was about SQL Server Mobile. And although SQL Server Mobile is going to be used in the code for the section where we actually perform the data syncing, you need to have a full-blown instance of SQL Server here. And you're also going to need the SQL Server, at least if you're running SQL Server 2005, SQL Server 2005 Mobile Edition server tools. And you can get those at this web address right here, http://shrinkster.com/g9f. Okay, so you just head right out there, you download the tools, you install them. It's a very straightforward install. I'd explain the whole thing in detail, but you're developers, and I'm sure you're going to be able to figure it out. It's just one of those next, finish sort of installs. You don't have to select a whole lot of really crazy options. And then finally, you're going to need some patience. Even after you watch me do this, it's still very easy to make a mistake somewhere along the way in the configuration of the environment, slip up, forget a security setting somewhere, and make a mistake. So just remember that it definitely works, and you might have to try it a couple times in order to get it down. But a little bit of patience is going to help you get through that. And I happen to know this from experience. So there you go. And with all that said, we are going to get started. So I'll show you where we go to actually download the tool that I was talking about. So it's shrinkster.com/g9f. So I'll bring up Internet Explorer here. So shrinkster.com/g9f. And here we are. So it takes us to the Microsoft SQL Server 2005 Mobile Edition Server Tools download page. And like I said, it's not a complicated install. You just download it, you follow the directions, and you're done. It's not a complicated sort of thing. So So after you've installed that, the next thing that you're going to want to do is run this wizard that comes with the tool. So I don't really need to be looking at IIS right now. What I would like to show you is the tool that gets installed. And I'm sure this is a lot of fun for you. You get to see what's in my personal start menu. This is not a work machine that I'm working on here, but my very own. And yeah, I'm a Microsoft guy, and I've got Mozilla Firefox, okay? So let's all just get really excited about that for a minute and then let it go. Every time I do a session, somebody has to point out, you are from Microsoft, and you have Firefox. Yeah, that is the truth, and oh well, whatever, who cares? So we go up here, and I've got SQL Server 2005 Mobile Edition as one of the items in my start menu. This is what gets installed after you install the server tools, and it really just comes with two things. One of them is this Configure Web Synchronization wizard, and that'll walk us through the steps of prepping IIS to host the DLL that's going to act as our broker between the mobile device and SQL Server, and then of course it comes with some documentation. But real developers, of course, never read the documentation, so we're just going to skip that. And I will run the Configure Web Synchronization wizard now. So it just tells us a little bit about what's going to happen here. We're going to be configuring a virtual directory in IIS, and it's going to set permissions for that directory, and it's going to set some file access permissions on folders that are needed for the data synchronization. So nothing too crazy here. We get to choose the type of subscriber that's going to be synchronizing data through this virtual directory, and since we're going to be trying to synchronize data using a Windows mobile device, or in other words, a device running SQL Server Mobile Edition, we're just going to leave this set to the default option here. Hit next, and Rory _ tablet is in fact the name of the computer running IIS, and we are going to have the wizard create a new virtual directory for us. So it's going to bring up my local machine and the default website. So I'm going to say, why don't you go ahead and create this new virtual directory under the default website for me. So I'll hit next again, and I'm going to give it an alias, and I'll just call this SQL Mobile, since that really makes sense. And take note of the path. This points out to the area that has the DLL that we're going to be running against, that DLL that I keep talking about that acts as sort of the broker for us. So I hit next again, and I have it set up here so that we're not going to be using SSL. However, if you were to set this up in a real environment and you were dealing with sensitive data, as is often the case, having SSL enabled is going to be typically rather wise. But it does go beyond the scope of this talk, especially since I'm trying to keep this talk under 20 minutes. So I'll hit next again. And I have the option here to either have clients authenticate using basic authentication or to connect anonymously. I'm going to go with anonymously just because it'll help us get through this a little bit faster, a little bit more easily, and I'm just trying to get across the basics, the concepts behind data synchronization here, rather than the security involved. So I'm going to hit next, and anonymous access will take place through the iUser account. That's pretty normal. And then I have the option of the virtual directory will be used for SQL Serve merge replication. We're not actually going to be using merge replication here, so I'm not going to select this box. I'll hit next again, and I get details on all of the different operations that the wizard is going to perform. And you know, you can sit here and read this to your heart's content. It's all very interesting. Then I'm going to hit finish, and it goes out, does it for me, and everything was done, and everything was successful, which means that we should have enough of our configuration set up that we can at least hit the DLL that is going to act as our broker. So I hit close. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to browse out to a local address just to test and make sure that everything was installed properly and that our device is going to be able to hit the DLL. So the address is going to be localhost/SQL Mobile. If you recall, that's the name that I gave to the virtual directory. And then the name of the DLL is SQL CESA30.dll. So I'll just hit enter here, and we'll see how this goes. Now, this is the success message you get. It doesn't say, whoopee, success, you connected, you're wonderful. It will just say this, SQL Server Mobile, or actually SQL Server Mobile Server Agent 3.0. This means that we did successfully manage to connect. Now, the next thing that we want to do is make sure that we can actually connect from our mobile device, since that is really the most important connection that we're going to be making. So I'm going to browse on over to SOTI Pocket Controller here, and I'm going to connect to my Pocket PC. There we go, so I'm hooked up now. And I'm going to go up to the Start menu. Again, this is my iMate Jazz Jar, and I'm going to open up Internet Explorer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to browse back out to that same address that I just went to on the local machine, except that I'm going to change localhost here to Rory_tablet, since that's where the DLL is actually being hosted. And so there we go. So I got the success message on the device as well, which means that we definitely have connectivity. This is a good sign. It means that we at least have IIS set up correctly. And now that's the first step. Okay. So once we have IIS set up correctly, we next need to ensure that we have SQL Server itself set up appropriately for access. So I'm going to head on over to SQL Server Management Studio. And I went on ahead and created a database a little bit earlier so that you wouldn't have to sit here and watch me do the whole thing. And it's called Mobile Demo. And it has one table in it. It's called Customers. I'll go on ahead and open the table here so you can take a look at it. Not too complicated. We have first name, last name, country. It's the basic customers table that I use for pretty much every single demo that I ever do. And you'll notice that the ID column uses GUIDs, or unique identifiers. And the reason for this is that in a distributed data application, right? I mean, on the desktop, we often just use integers, and we have auto increment set to true, so that whenever a new record is added, it just increases the value in the ID column, by 1. So we have records 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. That's fine when you're dealing with one server at a time. But if you have a whole bunch of people running around with PDAs or smartphones or whatever, and they're operating these data-aware applications, and they're adding records, changing records, and so on, they pull data in the morning, okay, so they all run out with the same copy, but by the end of the day, they're all going to be syncing up again. So when they push the data back, let's say, for example, that they were using ints, what's the likelihood that there's going to be a problem with data collision and the ID column? The odds are pretty high. In fact, I would say that the odds are about 100%, because eventually, I mean, there are going to be so many duplicate ID column values, it's ridiculous. So you really have to use unique identifiers here for the ID column. That's the only way to get around that problem. So that's the table itself. Just varchars and the unique identifier. Nothing complicated here. Now what we do have to do is ensure that we have a user that can access the database from the mobile device. So I'm going to head down to the Security tab here, because the thing is, we can't use Windows authentication. I mean, this is all going to be happening over the web, and the way RDA works and everything, Windows authentication just isn't going to work for us here. So I'm going to go down to the Security folder. I'm going to go to Logins. I'm going to right-click and select Add New Login. And I'm going to call this login Mobile User. And we're going to use SQL Server Authentication. And I'm going to use a really stupid password, which is just password. And I'm going to deselect the enforced password policy, because I don't want the application to yell at me and tell me that I have a stupid password. I already know that. And I'm going to change the default database to Mobile Demo, and then I'm going to hit OK. So we have our new user created, our mobile user. And the next thing that we want to do is head up here to our mobile database, our mobile demo database, expand the Security tab, expand users, right-click on users, hit New User, and we're going to call this user Mobile User just like before, and then we're going to select the login. So we hit Browse, and there's the user that we just created a moment ago, and I'm going to hit OK after I've selected it. Going to hit OK again, and I'm going to give this user, oops, let me scroll up here a little bit. How about DB Data Reader and DB Data Writer access? Then I'll hit OK. Everything's good. So we have the user set up, and that's pretty much it. And we're actually ready to go. Now that should, those are all the steps you're going to have to do in order to set up the server side for access through RDA. The next step is going to be to actually do the coding. But I wanted to make sure, because I figured that this is where you're going to encounter most of your problems, that this particular portion of the process existed in its own distinct and rather short little screencast. So I'll head back on over here to the slideshow. And again, if you have any questions, send them on to roryb@microsoft.com. And don't go anywhere. Go back on out to Channel 9 and watch the second part of this screencast, in which I'm actually going to write some code to work against this database, to pull from the database, to manipulate the data, and then to push it back out. So this demo isn't over yet. Just part A, or part 1, or however you want to call it. So thanks for watching.